All stations on Dragon, 1 minute until configure for terminal count.
T-minus 30 seconds. Minus 15 seconds.
Falcon 9, go for propellant loading.
Dragon is in countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition.
Welcome to our live coverage of SpaceX's Demo 1 mission. If you're just joining us, Dragon has performed its final departure burns from the International Space Station and is on its way back home to us. Today's mission actually began back on March 2nd when Dragon launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Following that successful launch, Dragon arrived at the space station and docked with the orbiting lab on March 3rd. Dragon's return to Earth will mark the third completion of SpaceX's first demonstration mission for NASA's Commercial Crew program. While there are no astronauts on board Dragon today, this demonstration mission represents an important milestone as we approach our first crewed mission later this year. Earlier today, Dragon powered up from sleep mode and began its departure procedures and system checks.
That's right, and then the spacecraft autonomously undocked from the International Space Station at 11:32 p.m. Pacific time just yesterday on March 7th. I'm pretty sure it's March 8th now. We've been here all night. And then it began a series of departure burns to move away from the station. We're going to be bringing you live coverage of the rest of the mission from the moment that Dragon jettisons its trunk to the deorbit burn all the way to that splashdown, which we're targeting for 5:45 a.m. Pacific time, with Dragon scheduled to splash down about 230 statute miles east of Kennedy Space Center. One interesting historical note for you real quick, it's actually been nearly 50 years to the day since Apollo 9 was the last spacecraft built for humans to splash down in the Atlantic. It completed its mission back on March 13, 1969. So a pretty big day and a pretty big historical note here. Unfortunately, due to a communications blackout, we're not going to be able to show you every step of Dragon's journey home, but we're going to be bringing you live status updates as it goes through the phase of things like the deorbit burn and the trunk separation, and we've been getting some pretty great views from the recovery ships out there, so we should have good views of Dragon as it comes down towards the water.
Yeah. Now, in this next phase of the mission, Dragon has a series of steps to complete before it returns home. First, Dragon will jettison its trunk, like Dan just said, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized part of the spacecraft. We do this as the trunk is no longer needed to complete the mission.
Yeah, that's going to be coming up in about 15 minutes or so. And like we said, we can't show every part of this for the mission, but we are going to be listening to the flight control teams. Again, we have one here right behind us in Hawthorne, and they're the ones basically monitoring all of Dragon systems just like they've been doing since it lifted off 6 days ago. It's flown by so far. It really has. But we're going to be listening in and giving you the updates as they come in.
Now, if you've been following along so far this morning, you might have seen us on the earlier webcast last night, this morning. It's hard to tell what time of day it is at this point. But you saw Dragon complete a series of burns. There were a number of departure burns away from the International Space Station that Dragon completed, which allowed the spacecraft to move further and further away from the station in a series of choreographed maneuvers. Everything went really well, and like we said, now we're just awaiting for that trunk separation. And after that, we'll have a pretty exciting deorbit burn and a splashdown. So we're looking forward to all that.
Yeah, at this point, the Dragon spacecraft is well below the International Space Station and quite a few kilometers ahead of it at this point. And that's just to make sure once that trunk's separated, it's not on the same orbital plane, basically, as the International Space Station is. So that'll be the next major milestone coming up. And then that deorbit burn, which we'll go through all of those times in just a little bit. But it's going to be about a 15-minute firing of those thrusters on Dragon. And that's just basically going to take it out of orbit. So it's going to fire these thrusters until that trajectory is basically pointing it right back down in the ocean, in the Atlantic, where we're landing a spacecraft built for humans for the first time in 50 years. So this is going to be a really exciting morning. And like I said, we'll be bringing you some pretty great views. The sun is up already over on the East Coast, so we'll have a nice daytime splashdown.
as someone who has seen this specific vehicle get built over the last couple of years, it's pretty incredible to, like I mentioned earlier in today's webcast, to actually see the astronauts on board the International Space Station floating in and out of the capsule as they were opening the hatch, and that was very exciting. And then upon the departure burns earlier, to see the imagery from the station as Dragon was leaving, it was just incredible. We had some amazing shots, and we've seen the artistic renderings for a couple of years now, what it would look like when Dragon was on station, and to finally see it was just a wonderful moment in terms of those of us that have had so many hours put into this spacecraft.
It almost didn't look real when
Yeah.
you see it, when you actually saw it flying out there. But I mean, since it departed, that happened early in the cruise day on board the space station, so they've since moved on to a bunch of other tasks. They actually woke up about an hour before Crew Dragon undocked, as they're operating on Greenwich Mean Time, so it was early in the morning for them. But they did offer some great words as Dragon undocked and flew away once it was outside of the approach ellipsoid, so about a kilometer or so away from the International Space Station. And as Kate said, it executed all of its departure burns. It executed 4 departure burns following that initial separation, basically taking it out in front and then up around and then finally out beneath the International Space Station, where it's now on its orbit awaiting this trunk separation and eventually the deorbit burn.
Yeah. So in terms of SpaceX history, this demonstration mission is incredibly important, as it's, like I said, the demonstration of our Crew program. Interestingly enough, the Dragon spacecraft that's hanging behind me here in Hawthorne, California, SpaceX headquarters, is similarly the same demonstration mission of our cargo program that we've been operating for NASA for the last couple of years in terms of the cargo resupply missions to the International Space Station. So who knows if the Demo 1 capsule will also be hanging behind us here in Hawthorne. I don't think we have the structural support for that, but in terms of what you see behind me, it's similar in terms of historical referencing for the importance of today's mission.
And that capsule actually already has another mission on the books for it. SpaceX is planning to use it in their ascent abort test coming a little bit later this year. That'll be between Demo 1, which we're about to wrap up today, and Demo 2, which will be the first flight that we actually have our astronauts on board that spacecraft. Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the 2 NASA astronauts, will be the first one to take Dragon into space. And the ascent abort, that will be a pretty cool test to see.
I wouldn't want to be involved with it because that's a lot of G-forces, but it'll be really important for us to be able to demonstrate the ability for the capsule to leave the vehicle in an urgent need to do so. So we're all looking forward to that test flight, as it's also something we've been working towards for the last couple of years. And yeah, that should be coming up in a couple of months here.
Yeah, and that'll be the second abort you guys have done, because you did a pad abort test already with a Dragon spacecraft. So basically just really putting the vehicle through all of the paces, all of these different abort tests, missions like this one right now, all ultimately with that goal of sending humans to the International Space Station on a Crew Dragon.
Yeah. Something else really interesting about today's mission, and in fact the commercial crew program going forward in terms of SpaceX's approach to landing the capsules, we are landing them in the Atlantic, like we mentioned earlier, whereas the cargo resupply mission Dragon capsules have all landed in the Pacific. So today is really exciting. We're really pumped to bring you footage of our recovery team as we pull Dragon out of the Atlantic Ocean. It's a lot of firsts today. It's been a lot of firsts all week, and to say the adrenaline has been pumping around here is an understatement.
Yeah, we even had a crowd earlier this morning behind us gathered down at the control, and there's
even more
crowd.
now.
Yeah, now it's 4:30 in the morning here on the West Coast, but the crowd is already starting to gather here at SpaceX headquarters. But interesting note, normally those cargo Dragons landing over in the Pacific, and while this vehicle ultimately designed for crew, it's also carrying some cargo. It carried about 400 pounds of cargo up to the International Space Station, and it's been packed with a little over 300 pounds for the return trip home. And that's broken out across a couple of different areas. One of the more interesting ones, and one of the ones NASA's really keen on, is it's bringing back what we call utilization, so some science samples. It actually has 2 bags. They're basically like coolers on board that are packed with these cold bricks that we're able to put science samples in. So the ones that are coming back home today using some of the human research projects on board the International Space Station is, we like to say, the astronauts are experiments themselves. We're always poking and prodding while they're up there just to see how the human body changes and reacts in microgravity. And a lot of the samples from a couple of those projects are coming home on Dragon today. Also bringing home a couple of radiation monitors, and one thing that our program manager, Kirk Shireman for the Space Station program, noted, it's also going to have a fan pump separator on it, and that's actually a piece, it's a piece of the spacesuits, the EMUs, the extravehicular mobility units. I'm from NASA, and we still use way too many acronyms, and it's a piece that actually failed on orbit some time back, and they're bringing it home to take a look at it. It was since replaced with a spare unit, and we do have some spacewalks coming up in March. So very busy time in space right now, but right now kind of all focused on watching this Dragon come home.
So the next milestone that we have coming up in about 7 minutes is the trunk separation. We will take a break for a few minutes while we await that, so stay tuned and we'll see you in a couple.
Oh, so right now we're waiting to hear for that trunk separation again. We are expecting to get that call just on the internal nets any moment now. That'll be the next major milestone, and then it'll be on to deorbit burn.
Exactly. So we should have that call out any minute now. As we wait for trunk separation, this is the last thing that Dragon has to do before it is able to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and splash down in the Atlantic Ocean.
That's right, yeah. The trunk not coming home, but the rest of the Dragon capsule, the more important part, is going to be coming home. The other stuff that Dragon's going to do before it does that final re-entry is close that nose cone, and we'll get through a little bit of that soon, but basically, that nose cone is going to protect that top part of the Dragon spacecraft, the docking adapter, and also the guidance and navigation and control sensors. So that's one of the last major milestones. That's another kind of departure from the cargo Dragon, which that nose cone gets jettisoned during the launch phase. But with Crew Dragon keeping the nose cone all the way through, it helps in the actual reusability of the Crew Dragon for future missions.
Now that trunk section is unpressurized, and we are able to use it to transport cargo on the way up to the International Space Station, but everything that comes back from station is put into the pressurized section. So we are able to jettison that trunk as it's no longer needed, and we're able to shed that extra weight.
And I think we just heard trunk separation.
All right, so hopefully we'll be able to bring you visual here shortly. Actually, no, we're too far away from station at the moment, so yeah.
Yep. So next up is going to be the spacecraft using some forward thrusters to perform the deorbit burn. This is going to be a really major step because once that deorbit burn happens, you're coming home. You're leaving orbit and you're coming back to Earth.
Can't wait.
That's going to put Dragon on a trajectory for that return. The burn will last about 15 minutes once it starts. So we're going to, again, continue to stand by. This is kind of the calm before the storm, if you will, where we're just waiting for things to really get into motion. Dragon's going to pretty soon do that deorbit burn. And then following that, it only takes about 45 minutes or so until it's in the water, down in the Atlantic, and ready to get picked up by the teams on the boats out there. So once again, we're going to continue to stand by. We're going to bring you these updates as they come in. But one more milestone down, just a few more to go, and then Dragon's home. So again, right now we're just standing by for this deorbit burn to start. We are expecting it to start in about a minute or so, and then after that it's going to take a little over 15 minutes to complete.
Yeah, so we have already jettisoned the trunk, as you heard us talk about a couple minutes ago. That was the last thing Dragon needed to do before it is able to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. And like we said, that'll be about a 15-minute burn, and then we will have parachute deployment and splashdown after that. So, like Dan said, kind of the calm before the storm. We're going to have a lot of activity coming up once we do pass through the re-entry burn. But at this point, we should be getting confirmation of the deorbit burn in a couple of seconds here.
That's right. And once the deorbit burn is complete, it's just about, I'm trying to do quick math in my head as I look at everything, but it's just about 40 minutes or so until Dragon's scheduled to be back down in the water. So it's a pretty quick ride from being in outer space to being right back down in the ocean. And we just
had confirmation of the deorbit burn. So like we said, this will last about 15 minutes. So deorbit burn has begun. At this point, Dragon has begun to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. It's going to get a little toasty, but we're excited for this to happen, as it is the next step, the next milestone in its journey home.
That's right. And again, ultimate destination down in the Atlantic Ocean, and there are boats standing by. We'll go through all the recovery courses and everything on site, but there is one main recovery boat. It's the Go Searcher, and that's going to have all of the SpaceX recovery teams who are responsible for actually going out and picking the capsule up out of the water. That is a view of the Go Searcher. This is actually a camera view from one of the other boats that's in the area, the Go Navigator, that has the combined NASA team on board as well. So once we actually have crew on board, everyone's going to be on one boat, so it'll be a little bit tighter quarters. But you'll have obviously the SpaceX people to go and recover the capsule, and then the NASA people typically also bring along the flight docs and the nurses. Anybody who's ever seen a landing in a Soyuz over in Kazakhstan is familiar with that. Once the crew comes home, after about a 6-month period, it's important we get a quick medical check out with them, just take the vitals, make sure they're doing okay, and help manage as they readapt to Earth's gravity for the first time in, up to 6 months or longer. So everyone will be on one boat, but for today we do have 2 boats, so we'll get some additional views, hopefully, from those different cameras as we get to watch Dragon come down. But for now, we are in that deorbit burn, so we got a couple more minutes until that is complete, and then we're one step closer to Dragon being back.
Yeah, so while Dragon is re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, we're going to pause for a few minutes until the deorbit burn completes. So be sure to stick around, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
right now. We're about halfway through that deorbit burn. So again, we expect it to last about 15 minutes and 20 seconds. The visiting vehicle officer all the way back in Houston was just reporting to the station flight director, again, that we were about halfway through. We're continuing to get a couple of views from the boats, and again, those are cameras that are going to be tracking Dragon once it's coming down under those parachutes. And we're also starting to get, it looks like this is a view from a WB-57 airplane. And so we have a number of assets out there off the Florida coast. Again, there's two ships rather, both with tracking cameras on board. And NASA also flying its WB-57 aircraft, typically used for high altitude weather research and other science missions. But it has a camera affixed on it and should hopefully give us some views of Dragon coming down under those parachutes.
So there on your screen, you see a beautiful shot of Ghost Searcher, which is our primary recovery vessel. There on the front part of the ship, you can see what would essentially be the crew's quarters during the wait. They could be out to sea, depending on how rough the waves are, for a couple of weeks to just a couple of days, depending on the splashdown point. So they're coming into the view on the right-hand side of your screen. At the top is actually the helipad. For helicopters to land if we need to take the astronauts to shore quicker than just having them ride along on the ship. And really something that I just absolutely love about this vessel is underneath that helipad are actually medical quarters. So we're able to get the astronauts checked out immediately after egressing from the capsule, and we're able to check them out there and give them a warm welcome, not on land yet, obviously, but it's just such an incredible vehicle there that we're able to sustain so much activity while we're waiting for the astronauts to splash down, and then obviously once they are on board.
It's also important to note, so right now the teams are about 200 or so, give or take, nautical miles off the coast. That won't be the case when we are bringing crew members back. That landing zone much closer in. I think it typically ranges out about 20 to 24 nautical miles or so away from the port. So that gives them the capability to then get back in within just a couple of hours instead of a little over a day that it's looking like it's going to take the teams to bring Dragon back after this mission.
There we have some views from Dragon as it is re-entering the atmosphere. It's pretty dark in space.
Yeah, we're still in the midst of that deorbit burn. We're expecting that to take about 5 more minutes, so that's pretty unique, getting views from the spacecraft while that deorbit burn is still underway. But again, this is just the final maneuver, that final firing of those Draco thrusters, just to bring Dragon out of orbit and set it up on a trajectory to ultimately splash down over there in the Atlantic, where, as you were just seeing, the recovery teams are standing by, ready and waiting to receive. And again, this deorbit burn planned to last about 15 minutes and 20 seconds. And this is just to ultimately carry Dragon out of its circular orbit. So right now it's been in a circular orbit just beneath the space station's orbit. We call it a co-elliptic orbit for the last several hours. And this deorbit burn is going to radically change that planned orbit, basically setting it up to intersect back down with the Earth, back down there in the water where the recovery teams are waiting.
Now that we have a full view of the recovery vessel on the very right side of your screen, we can see a portion of the ship that we weren't able to see before, and that's actually the portion of the ship where once the Dragon capsule is close enough, it will be lifted up out of the water by that vertical piece that you see there. It'll actually actuate out over the water and lift the Dragon capsule up out of the ocean and then bring it back onto the boat and set it down into its nest. So pretty cool. This is new new technology that we've installed on this ship specifically for our Crew Dragon missions. So it's like we said before, this is a demonstration mission, and while our recovery team has been practicing for recovery operations, this is obviously the first time that they will be practicing with a vehicle that's coming from space. So we're all very excited to be bringing you live coverage as all of this unfolds over the next hour or so.
And to give you a timeline of that recovery period, it's expected to take a little under an hour or so for the teams to actually have the capsule back up on the boat, which in a situation where there's crew on board, that's about that hour to get the crew out of the water and onto the boat so they can do all of their initial medical checks and everything else that we typically do after crew members are returning from these long duration missions. The waves looking pretty calm though, looking like really good conditions out there in the Atlantic. Again, they're a little over 200 nautical miles off the coast of Florida, and they'll ultimately be bound back for Port Canaveral, where the spacecraft's going to get brought back in and handed over to the SpaceX teams there, where they're going to begin processing and pretty much getting ready to turn it around for that ascent aboard.
Yeah. We've been monitoring the recovery weather conditions over the last several days, and now that Recovery Day has come upon us, we can see that we have beautiful skies and in my unprofessional nautical knowledge, relatively calm seas by my eyes. But it's really difficult to be able to predict what the weather is going to be like at sea very far in advance. So we're all very happy to be able to have clear imagery of the recovery team as we make progress here.
I feel like we've lucked out with Florida weather so far on this mission. All right, we're here, and there's about 1 minute left in this deorbit burn, so just about done with that. And again, this is just that final maneuver to begin bringing Dragon out of space and down to the ocean. They're still getting a couple of views from on board the Dragon spacecraft. That's what you're looking at right now. Now we're just going to stand by and listen for how the deorbit burn went. Should be wrapping up momentarily.
So like Dan said, we are waiting confirmation of the conclusion of the deorbit burn. It's been going on for the last several minutes, and like we said before, Dragon departed space station earlier today, performed a number of departure burns, and now we are hopefully just exiting the final burn, and that's the re-entry burn. And there on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see our recovery vessel waiting for the splashdown of Dragon. Once we exit the re-entry burn, we will have parachute deployment. The first one of those will be the drogue chutes, the smaller chutes that slow the vehicle down, followed by the main parachute deployment. And that will slow it down even further, allowing it to come to a slower velocity as it approaches the surface of the ocean.
And we are being told that was a nominal burn, so the deorbit burn is complete. Dragon is on its way home. And so the next thing that's going to happen is that nose cone on Dragon is going to get closed. We heard that process is now in work. And then it's time for Dragon to really get through the Earth's atmosphere and ultimately splash down. So that's where the vehicle is going to heat up tremendously, because again, you have to keep in mind Dragon traveling at thousands of miles per hour right now, and when it hits the thicker part of the Earth's atmosphere, it's going to heat up tremendously from the friction. And this is actually video of the nose cone starting to close on the Dragon spacecraft. And again, that nose cone just closes to protect that top portion of the vehicle from all of the re-entry events, not only the re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere, but also once it's down in the water. And that protects the guidance and navigation and control sensors on top of Dragon. and also that docking ring that it uses to attach to the space station.
So again, what you're seeing right now is the nose cone closing on the Dragon spacecraft as we await for it to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
All right, so that nose cone looks like it's just about closed. We'll wait for final confirmation that everything looks good with it. But then pretty soon we're going to be looking towards the actual entry interface. So that's, again, where Dragon starts hitting enough atmosphere that it's going to start heating up. Because right now it's still high enough, even following that deorbit burn, that it's still not feeling those effects. But the atmosphere is going to get thicker as it starts to descend, and that's going to heat the vehicle up. That's why you always have this heat shield on the bottom of these spacecrafts, and that's why a lot of them are in this conical shape. As a lot of engineers I've talked to, they like to say physics haven't changed since the 1960s. When we made the spacecraft back then, it was for that it was that shape for a reason, and so that's why it's so common to see this capsule design. Just because of how you re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, it makes a lot of sense.
So we just heard confirmation that the nose cone hooks have begun the process of securing the nose cone into place prior to that re-entry burn.
That's right, and so there's actually an anticipated time where you lose signal with the spacecraft, and that's just because as you're re-entering the Earth's atmosphere and you go through that intense heat, plasma actually builds up on the outside of the spacecraft, and you can't send or receive signals from there. So it's very common when there's people on board, you'll lose the voice communication between them and the ground, and you'll lose all the telemetry or the data streams that you have coming from the spacecraft to rooms like the Mission Control Center just behind us here in Hawthorne. So that'll be coming up. We're expecting that to happen at about 5:33 a.m. Pacific. So coming up in just about 20 minutes from now.
Exactly, and so after we are able to get through that phase of the mission, like we said before, following that will be the deployment of the parachutes and then splashdown.
Right.
So just a quick recap in case if you have just joined us recently. We have departed from the International Space Station. Dragon completed a series of 4 departure burns in a slowly choreographed maneuver, and now we have already jettisoned the trunk of the Dragon spacecraft. We have completed the deorbit burn, and now we're just starting to come back down through the Earth's atmosphere and the final leg on Dragon's way home.
That's right, so that nose cone's closed, and we're just going to be standing by to wait until we go through that entry interface. Again, that'll be about 20 minutes from now. And then once it's down through there, it's time for the parachutes. And we talked about the parachutes a little while ago, and we should hopefully get to see those parachutes maybe from the plane. But once it's down beneath the cloud deck, so we should be able to see them from the boats that'll be standing by out there at the recovery zone. And it comes in 2 different stages. Can you walk us through the parachutes real quick?
Yeah. So with the parachutes, we will have the drogue parachutes. Those are the smaller chutes that will come out that will slow the vehicle down a little bit, and then we will have the main parachutes. Those are clearly visible by the orange and white coloring on them. Very iconic if you've watched our previous Dragon splashdowns for the cargo resupply missions. So we will have that, and then that's what will slow the vehicle down enough to have a safe splashdown in the water. So at this point, another fun fact about Dragon, in the return to Earth, the seats inside the capsule at this point have actuated or turned into the re-entry position. So depending on what phase of the mission we are in, the seats will actually actuate or adjust the angle to make sure that the G-forces that the astronauts will be experiencing are in the right places. So with that being said, we will take a quick break as we active operations here at SpaceX. So with that being said, we will take a quick break. Be sure to stay tuned with us as we go through this period of anticipated blackout with the Dragon capsule. We'll be back in just a few as we come back in anticipation of that parachute deployment. Stick around.
if you're just now joining us, we have had a successful deorbit burn, so that was the last major milestone. We've also confirmed that the nose cone is closed, the hook's all engaged, and so now we're just waiting for Dragon to begin making its way through the Earth's atmosphere. That deorbit burn lasted a little over 15 minutes and was reported that it was done successfully, no issues, and Dragon is now on its way home. We're continuing to get some pretty great views from the boats out there in the splashdown zone. We're also going to be on the lookout for some video possibly from an aircraft that we have in the area. One of NASA's WB-57 research planes is going to be trying to get some views of Dragon and the chute deploy and actually coming down under the parachutes. There are some clouds in the area, so the boats might not see it right away, but once it's underneath those cloud decks, they'll have some pretty great views of it coming down.
So there on your screen, again, you can see our primary recovery vessel. That is, well, there it went. But that is our recovery ship that is fully equipped with medical quarters for checkouts. Once we do have crew on board Dragon for our upcoming missions, they will be able to come out of the capsule and get a full medical checkout immediately afterward. There's also a helipad there where a helicopter can land in the event that we might need to get them back to port sooner than what the boat may be able to go. And there on your screen you can actually see, I mentioned earlier, the lift that will bring Dragon out of the water has actuated it into its recovery position. So that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen at the end of the boat, and that is what will actually take Dragon out of the water, lift it up, and then place it into its nest, which it's the official term for it on the ship, and then that would be considered the end, at least whenever we get to that point, that will be the end of our webcast today. But at this point, we're still waiting for the parachutes to deploy and then for the entire recovery operation, which, like I mentioned before, the recovery team has practiced this, but obviously not with a vessel that has come down from the International Space Station yet. So a lot of firsts that we'll be seeing today, and we're really excited to be able to share that with you.
Yeah, and if you missed the very beginning, the fun historical tidbit we had for today was it's been almost 50 years to the day since we've landed a spacecraft designed for humans in the Atlantic Ocean. That last one was Apollo 9, and that was back on March 13th, 1969. It was actually supposed to land in the Pacific, but ended up shooting for the Atlantic, and that was the last time they landed one in that area. So it's going to be exciting to see this water recovery. All of our crew members for the last couple of years, well, basically since we stopped flying the space shuttle, have come down for land landings over in Kazakhstan on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. But in the not too distant future, we'll have crew members Doug Hurley and Bob Benkin, still waking up. They'll be on the Dragon for the Demo 2 mission a little bit later this year. So everything looking really good so far. We're going to continue to stand by and wait for that entry interface. We are just about 20 minutes away from when we're expecting to actually see Dragon under those parachutes. So not much longer, good things to come.
There's a lot of anticipation. There's a crowd growing behind me here at SpaceX headquarters. Our mission control center is just down there, and you can probably hear the voices in the room around us, and the crowd is definitely starting to grow in anticipation of Dragon's reappearance. So with that being said, we will take a quick break as we await for Dragon to re-enter and for those parachute deployments. Stick around. We'll be back in just a few.
so we're getting a bit of a treat here. You're getting a live view inside the Dragon capsule as, again, it's getting closer and closer to that entry interface coming through the Earth's atmosphere and then splashing down in the Atlantic Ocean. But first, we have a very special guest, somebody who's going to be on board a Dragon in the not-too-distant future, NASA astronaut Bob Behnken. Bob, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking a couple of minutes. I know you're following along with the teams. There's a lot of excitement. How are you feeling about the mission so far?
Well, I think I said this before when we were out here for the ascent phase and docking. Just super excited. You know, of course, this one is the precursor for our mission that's upcoming here. And so when this one's done successfully, we'll be one step closer to our flight.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what is in store for you between now and that flight? What kind of preparations do you have left to do?
That's a great question. We have a significant amount of training that we need to go through. So we'll walk through all the various phases of flight. So we'll do pre-launch. We'll get suited. We'll do that here in Hawthorne in the Buck. We'll do a walkthrough at the Kennedy Space Center, actually on the launch pad. Learn a little bit more about the emergency escape system if we should need that prior to launching into space. And so we'll walk through all those different scenarios. Then we'll head back out here again for a couple of other events associated with docking and, of course, with the reentry.
And so we're getting views inside the Dragon spacecraft, and I mean, a camera's okay, but it can't do the real thing justice. What's it like to be like in a spacecraft when you're coming back through and everything's heating up?
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces of coming back through the atmosphere. The first one is really emotional for those of us who've seen a lot of spacecraft come back. It's just it's very special to kind of go through that experience, and it's a physical thing as well, as you actually see the light from the atmosphere as it heats up the external portions of the spacecraft. You see some orange lights flickering, the plasma kind of go past the windows. The windows will be down in near our feet on this vehicle. That'll be our closest view out the window per se, but it's definitely something that we'll be able to see and know the outside of the vehicle is going through something pretty severe, and we'll be hoping it takes care of us as it takes us through entry.
That's incredible. I can't even imagine what that experience might be like.
Remarkable. Again, there's the physical piece of it. You can, sensations that come in with the light, but there's also the emotion of knowing that you're taking all that energy that you put into the vehicle to get it into orbit. It's all got to come back out so that you can get back to the ground safely.
So it's been a while since you've been to space. Is there anything you're really looking forward to when you get to the space station? Anything like what's your bucket list once you get back up there?
For me, when I get back to the International Space Station, I really am looking forward to seeing it completely complete. I was pretty close with my flight. We put the cupola on the underside of the space station. One of the things close to the construction complete on the International Space Station. So I'm looking forward to getting back in there and actually experiencing sunrises and sunsets again. They're just remarkable from on orbit. Not quite the same as they are from the ground, and can't get that anyplace else.
Last question for you. I'm sure you've been following along on social media. You've seen the photos of our zero-G indicator. Now, he's not coming back until you bring him back for us, so you'll have a little bit of time to play with him while you're on station. Is there anything that you would like to teach little Earthy while you're up on station with him?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't actually realize that little Earthy was going to stay on board the space station until Lee Rosen, one of your folks here at SpaceX, come and let us know when we sat down to watch on docking, and he said, "Hey, we're going to need Earthy back. You got to bring him back." And so I think our plan is to have him teach us. He's going to welcome us aboard probably when we get there. And I think Ann and David and Oleg have trained him up well. So hopefully he can walk us through the emergency brief, and he's a full-fledged station crew member by the time that we get there.
Well, it definitely looks like he's been getting a crash course in just about everything.
Yeah, he should have it all, and he ought to be able to transfer it to us. That's part of being a crew member that arrives and takes over responsibilities on the International Space Station.
That's very cool. Well, we certainly look forward to him coming back as well as you and Doug in our Demo 2 mission in a couple of months. So it'll be very exciting.
Very much looking forward to it, as you might imagine.
Us as well.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to get back to the re-entry interface. Bob, we're going to let you go watch along because, again, vested interest in everything that's happening. Thanks so much for jumping upstairs real quick and talking about this.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, we are awaiting the deployment, or excuse me, the final phase of the re-entry of Dragon spacecraft as it's coming back through the Earth's atmosphere. I'm still kind of reeling from his comments about what it's like to actually come barreling through the Earth's atmosphere, something that you see depicted in movies and TV shows, of course, but to hear it live from the source is pretty cool. And that's exactly what Dragon and Ripley are doing right now. So we brought you a live view of that just a couple of minutes ago. That was pretty cool that we were able to get that shot. Like we said, plasma will be building up on the exterior of the vehicle as it's re-entering the atmosphere. So there's a blackout period that we were expecting, and that's where we're at right now. So while we can't bring you a view of Ripley on her journey back to the Atlantic Ocean, you can see a view of our recovery ship there. Like I said before, we can now see that the lift arms have actuated out into the recovery position, and they're like that in anticipation of Dragon being pulled in to position closer to the end of the ship and being lifted up into the recovery nest.
And you got to imagine the teams out there on the ocean are ready for this to come home. Again, since they're about 200, give or take, nautical miles out to sea, they actually left yesterday, so they've been out on the water for some time, so they're ready and waiting. Again, the prime team is on that Ghost Searcher, and that's a bunch of SpaceX technicians who are going to be responsible for going out on some fast boats that will deploy from that prime ship, and they'll begin just basically getting the capsule stable and then bringing it in closer to ultimately get hoisted up on the ship. Also going off to make sure that they get those parachutes as those get jettisoned from the capsule at pretty much just at the moment of touchdown. So we're just going to be ready to watch all of that unfold pretty soon. We should be seeing those parachutes in about 10 or 11 minutes from now, right after Dragon begins that final plunge through the Earth's atmosphere. So we're getting a lot closer. Things are really going to pick up once we get those first views of Dragon over the Atlantic there.
Absolutely. So like Dan just said, we've got about 10 minutes until we see the first deployment, which are the deployments of the drogue parachutes. So with that being said, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a few as we get closer to parachute deployment.
So this is a view from that WB-57 airplane. You were looking at Dragon streaking across the sky on its re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere, aiming for a splashdown in just a little while from now.
So it's pretty exciting that we get this shot right now, as it is our first view from planet Earth of the Dragon capsule since it lifted off from Cape Canaveral just several days ago.
I will say this is a pretty rare treat to be able to see this here. And again, this video is coming from a NASA airplane that we're flying around that recovery zone there, a WB-57. It's commonly used for a lot of atmospheric studies and other science missions, but able to put a tracking camera on it to try and get this re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere today. We're hearing that they should have AOSO acquisition of signal back with the Dragon spacecraft. Right now it's about 46 kilometers in altitude.
Yeah, so just for orientation purposes, if you've seen our launches previously, you might be familiar with the angling of this as takeoff. Reminder, this is re-entry. The plane is below the Dragon spacecraft and the camera's looking upward as it's coming over the spacecraft. So it looks like from the orientation of the imagery there that Dragon is going up when in fact it is still coming back down towards Earth.
And again, just keeping you on the timeline, so we actually acquired signal about a minute ahead of when it was expected, where we're going to be looking for those initial drogue chute deployments at about 41 minutes after the hour. So after Dragon gets a little bit lower down, we're going to be keeping an eye out. You're going to see the drogue chutes deploy initially, followed by those 4 main parachutes, much larger and able to slow the vehicle down for a much softer splashdown in the ocean.
We should be getting that drogue chute deployment in just about 2 minutes now.
And just heard that we're now below 30 kilometers. And if you're just now tuning in, this is Dragon. This is Dragon coming home. This is from a camera on board a chase plane there at the landing zone over the Atlantic, about 200 or so nautical miles off the coast of Florida. We're under 30 kilometers, continuing to descend. The next milestone we're going to be looking for is parachute deployment. And hearing we're now about 20 kilometers in altitude. The Dragon spacecraft continuing to descend. It's now subsonic, so already starting to slow down thanks to the aero braking, basically slamming into that Earth's atmosphere, causes a lot of friction and allows the vehicle to eventually reach its terminal velocity, basically, and then those parachutes are going to kick in.
So there you have visual confirmation of the deployment of our drogue parachutes. This is the first of 2 parachute deployments.
And so those drogue chutes do the initial slowing, and then they're ultimately going to pull out the 4 main parachutes responsible for really slowing the spacecraft down prior to that splashdown.
You can hear cheering here at SpaceX headquarters as the employees that have gathered around our Mission Control Center are sharing the same view as you. What a gorgeous shot of Dragon coming back down. seconds, we will see those main parachutes exactly like that begin to expand as they capture more air, further decelerating the Dragon vehicle down to the Atlantic Ocean. You really can't ask for a more picture-perfect shot than that.
And yes, all 4 chutes now deployed. It's going to continue to descend. It's going to continue to slow down and then ultimately splash down in the Atlantic there. We're now under 1 kilometer in altitude. Just about 750 meters to go.
In case if you're just joining us, you can see on your screen there, Dragon has just re-entered the Earth's atmosphere after departing from the International Space Station. We have a gorgeous shot of 4 healthy parachutes deployed and slowing the vehicle down as it is approaching the surface of the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida.
And it's continuing to descend under those chutes. We just passed 500 meters. Everything continuing to look good via reports to all the flight control teams. Now we're at about 400 meters. And just passing 300 meters, continuing to descend. We might be right on time. We were planning on splashing down at about 5:45 a.m. Pacific, and we're getting real close to that bingo time. Just past 200 meters.
And we have confirmation that Dragon is now under 100 meters, is 100 meters above the surface of the ocean.
So next up, standing by for splashdown.
Of splashdown. Dragon has returned to planet Earth. It is now back home, and you can see on your screen our 2 fast boats racing out to the capsule, now in recovery.
That splashdown came right on time, 5:45 a.m. Pacific, 8:45 a.m. over on the East Coast. The teams that have been ready and waiting, they were staged just a few nautical miles away. They're going to start moving in now. You can see those 2 fast approach boats already speeding their way towards the capsule.
While there's still a little bit more work to be done at this point, like we said, the recovery team has to safe the vehicle and then lift it onto the recovery vessel. However, obviously by the excited cheers here at Mission Control, the splashdown is an enormous event for us in terms of the safe re-entry, the safe return to Earth from the International Space Station.
That's right, and you'll notice 2 boats on their way. 1 boat actually responsible for beginning to safe the vehicle and get it ready to go up onto the boat. The other one's going to go off and collect those parachutes as those 4 main chutes actually get jettisoned away from the spacecraft as soon as the vehicle detects that it's splashed down in the water. But if you missed it, I'm really sorry because that was really cool to see. But Dragon did splash down at 5:45 a.m. Pacific time, 8:45 a.m. over there on the East Coast, where they're now moving in on a Dragon spacecraft in the water, ready to recover it.
Exactly. So like we said, the recovery team has been ready and waiting for a Dragon splashdown. It's been quite the morning. evening. Dan and I have been here since yesterday night, bringing you coverage from Dragon departure from the International Space Station now all the way down to splashdown. So it's a great next milestone, and we are excited to bring you coverage of the recovery operations as well. But we have a few minutes before that happens, so we're going to take a break momentarily, and we will continue bringing coverage as the recovery operations progress.
We're going to take a quick break from the operations because right now we have Benji Reed. He's the director of the Commercial Crew Mission Management here at SpaceX. Benji, first off, congratulations. Successful splashdown, successful end of Demo 1. What's it been like to watch through this mission? What are your thoughts? What are you looking forward to? Have you had a chance to catch your breath?
No, but I'm super excited. Thank you for having me up here. To be honest, I'm kind of shaking, and I'm super, excited. It was an incredible journey to get to this moment. The teams have just done an amazing job, both the SpaceX and the NASA teams jointly. It's fundamentally, this is like a great day for the nation, for SpaceX, for NASA, for all of us, really for the world. I think it was Ann who said this is the first time in 40 years that we have a spacecraft designed for humans to fly. And not only did she fly and go to the space station, do everything she was supposed to do, but we brought her home safe and sound, landing here in the Atlantic. Just amazing. I can't believe how well the whole mission is done. Pretty much, I think on every point, everything's been nailed all the way along. Particularly this last piece, we're all very excited to see as we go through re-entry and parachute, drogue deployed, and main deploy, splashdown. Everything happened just perfectly, right on time, the way that we expected it to.
Almost down to the second.
Almost down to the second, right?
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And so, as a team, SpaceX, we're here. We're just super honored to have the opportunity to have done this mission, to have worked with NASA to work through this. And Demo 1 is fundamentally this first major milestone in our process towards certification. I always like to remind everybody that, this is a whole system, right? There's Crew Dragon, but there's the Falcon that's going to be certified to fly humans. There's also all the ground systems, the operations, our entire factory and production system. Everything that we do is being certified to be able to fly astronauts safely. And this is a huge step towards that. As we kind of look back over what happened over the last few days, which seems incredible to me, and really it's the culmination of years of work to get us just to this day. We had launch, Crew Dragon deployed, beautiful free flight. One of the things that's hard to test when you're on the ground is how fluids work in microgravity. So things like the prop system and all of the propulsion. And what's amazing is that worked perfectly, just like we expected. We got to station, we docked, and it's the first time, I think, in history that a commercial vehicle and also an American vehicle has docked autonomously to the International Space Station. So that's just super cool. Loaded with all kinds of sensors, all kinds of tests that we did. We met Ripley. Yeah. We got to see, she's loaded with sensors so we can understand exactly all the forces that will happen on the crew as they come. As they're launched and then sent to station and come home. We got to meet the Little Earth guy. I heard he's going to stay on station. Yep. and so that'll be for Bob and Doug to retrieve. So that's really exciting. Undocking, of course. Some more free flight, and then we came home. Jettisoned the trunk. Closed the nose cone. And then again, like I said, just beautiful parachute deployment. Everything the way we expected. All of these gazillions of tests that we've been doing on parachutes. All of the analysis and work that we've done on understanding the aerodynamics of reentry and coming home, everything's just wonderful. The important thing now is we take all of this data that we've learned.
We love data.
And we love data, right? I mean, fundamentally, we're engineers and engineering-driven behavior, right? It's what we got to do. So we take all that great data, and we're going to apply that to the next steps. So what's coming up next, I think, because believe it or not, as excited and still shaking as I am about this return, there's a lot more to do, right? Because our ultimate goal is to be able to continue to staff space station, right, and provide astronauts rides up to space, give them a safe place to be, a safe place to come home in, and do crew rotations every 6 months. So how do we get there? So we finished Demo 1, huge milestone. Next up, we take that data, we apply it, we learn from it, and we're going to go to our in-flight abort test, similar to that pad abort test that we did a few years ago. Except this time we put the Dragon, and actually the same Dragon that we flew on Demo 1. We're going to take that and put it on top of a Falcon 9, launch it, get it going super fast, get it to test conditions, and then escape it off of the rocket. And again, do the same thing, bring it home safely on its parachutes, land it in the ocean. And then from there, after we get that done, we go to Demo 2. And that's kind of like, wow, that's the big prize, right? Because that's going to be sending Bob and Doug, our astronauts and our partners and our friends, sending them up on Dragon, taking them to the station safely, bringing them home safely. And then with that done, we'll go through final full certification and start those 6-month rotation missions, which we're just also excited about. As it's important to take a step back and think about all of what it took to get here, all the work from all the joint teams, NASA and SpaceX, all the support that we've had from friends and family, and really I think the most important thing is that on behalf of all of the 6,000 people here at SpaceX, we really want to thank NASA, we want to thank the space station, the international partners, and thank the American public for their support and partnership as we go through this. We're really proud to be part of this endeavor.
Thank you for being here with us. It is early Friday morning here in Hawthorne, so for those of us that work here at SpaceX, we still got a full workday going, and obviously we've already been working on Demo 2 for a while, even though today was the Demo 1 day, so I'm sure that you, like me, will continue our work on Demo 2 for the rest of the day.
I'm going into meetings to start talking about the next step that we've already been working on Demo 2. So.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. Congratulations to your team as well on the success of the last week. Really, it's been awesome for us to be able to share the hard work of all SpaceX employees with the public. So with that being said, thanks for being here. We're going to take a quick break as we bring you more coverage of the recovery operations, which you can see is ongoing on your screen there on the left. So stick around. We'll be back in just a couple.
We're waiting to get some video back from those recovery teams out there in the Atlantic. For now, though, we do have another guest for today's broadcast, NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine, who's standing by over at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. So I'll send it over to you, Mr. Bridenstine. Thoughts about today's mission, what this means for NASA, and what we have to look forward to in the future.
Absolutely. This is an amazing achievement in American history. In fact, I said on a press conference at 4 in the morning after it launched that this was the dawn of a new era in American human spaceflight, and really in the spaceflight for the entire world because of all of our international partners on the International Space Station. But this achievement spans many administrations. It spans many NASA administrators. I want to start by thanking Mike Griffin, who was the NASA administrator that really got this program going during the George W. Bush administration. And of course, Charlie Bolden was the administrator for 8 years under President Barack Obama. He kept this program strong. And then, of course, Robert Lightfoot was immediately preceded me. And here we are today with this amazing achievement. And the current president, President Trump, his budgets for NASA have been as strong as they have been in my adult lifetime. So this really is an American achievement that spans many generations of NASA administrators, and in fact, over a decade of work by the NASA team. So I want to congratulate, first of all, the NASA Commercial Crew Program, all of the amazing engineers that have been involved from the very beginning. I want to thank, of course, the amazing achievement of SpaceX and their entire team, and the vision of Elon Musk and what he has done to help really rejuvenate this very inspirational moment for this new era in American human spaceflight. So this is really an amazing achievement for all of America, but it's not just for all of America right now. It goes back in time. There are so many people that deserve credit, and really what's unique now is that NASA can be a customer. And I know there's a long way to go. We launched an uncrewed spacecraft here. Of course, we have Demo 2, which will be a crewed spacecraft. And between now and then, we have a pad abort that we need to test as well. And so these are all capabilities that are leading to a day where we are launching American astronauts on American rockets from American soil. I have heard, when I was a member of Congress, I heard over and over again, how do we keep constancy of purpose? Because it seems like we lurch from one administration to the next and changing visions and changing budgets. How do we keep constancy? Well, this is a perfect example of a program. When we talk about these things that NASA does, it takes, in many cases, decades to achieve this kind of capability. And the constancy of purpose here for all of these years is important. But now NASA can be a customer. We can be one customer of many customers for human spaceflight in what we believe will be a very robust commercial marketplace for space operations. And we're going to have numerous providers that are going to compete on cost and innovation. And of course, that's how we're able to do what we've seen now, where rockets are being reused. The idea that we can reuse rockets and drive down cost and increase access to space, just an amazing capability for our country, an amazing capability for the world. Just like we reuse airplanes, there's going to come a day when we're reusing rockets and spaceflight is going to become more routine. We're not there yet. We have a long way to go. But this is an amazing achievement in this path to really a sustainable return to the moon, quite frankly, which is my charge the President has given me to get us back to the moon. So we're driving down costs for low Earth orbit. We're commercializing low Earth orbit, not just with launch, but also eventually with space stations, with human activities, where NASA can be a customer for human activities in low Earth orbit. And then we can use the taxpayer resources that are bestowed upon us. We can use those resources to do exploration, to go further, to go back to the moon sustainably, where we can stay at the moon and ultimately go on to Mars. And this is one small piece in that really grand vision, but this is no small piece. This is an amazing achievement in the history of the United States of America, and it just really exemplifies what we can achieve when we maintain that constancy of purpose.
All right. And thank you, Administrator Jim Bridenstine, again, joining us just there from NASA headquarters over in Washington, D.C. We are still waiting to get some views from all the recovery teams. They are still in that recovery process. Again, we expected it to be between 30 minutes and an hour until they get the Dragon capsule back up on the boat. So before we do get those feeds back, we're going to head out to JSC real quick, the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where we have a few more folks standing by, including Steve Stitch, who is the Deputy Program Manager for NASA's Commercial Crew Program. We also have Mike Hopkins, a NASA astronaut, and one of those astronauts already assigned to a future Dragon mission. And then Mr. Kenny Todd, he's the Operations Integration Manager for the International Space Station. So guys, I'll send it over to you real quick. Offer us your thoughts on how this mission's unfolded and what's ahead in the future.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Hey, it's great to be here representing the Commercial Crew Program. Just what an outstanding day to be part of our program. You know, we left our contracts in 2014 for these first missions, and to sit here today and talk about Demo 1 and how great the flight went and what we're going to learn from it, it's just amazing. I'd like to congratulate the SpaceX team, a phenomenal job getting the vehicles ready and executing the flight. Our whole NASA team that worked the mission. And if you just think about the enormity of what happened in this flight and all the prep that went into it, getting the pad refurbished at 39A, getting the flight control room set up, getting the vehicles built, getting the Falcon 9 ready, all the analysis, all the mission support that went into it, the sims and the practice leading up to this flight over the last year or so. Just been a tremendous job. I would say one of the things that we learned during this flight is the great relationship we have between the program and SpaceX. I would say our teams work seamlessly back and forth with SpaceX, not only in the lead up to the flight, but in how we manage the flight through the Dragon mission management team, and then also working with Kenny Todd and the Space Station program. Space Station program did a phenomenal job supporting our program while we were docked to station, on the way to station, and the international partnership as well. So really great opportunity for this mission. The last 24 hours have been exciting for us. You know, we closed the hatches yesterday around noon, got into the undock today about 1:31 a.m., did a few small separations to get away from station. If you watched that on NASA TV, that was flawless. Did about 3 separations to get down below station, executed the deorbit burn at about 6:52 a.m. Central Time, and then landed it just a few minutes ago at 7:45. The vehicle's doing well. The recovery crews are out. They're on the scene. They've already been around the spacecraft and made sure it was secure for personnel. You might have seen that one of the parachutes tapped in. It was a very calm day with very low sea states and low winds. One of the chutes kind of landed on the Dragon capsule. They already got that off. So that's going really well. It'll probably take 30 minutes to maybe an hour to get it back on the ship. But then when you kind of look overall at this mission, it was a great dress rehearsal for Demo 2. We learned a phenomenal amount in the pre-launch time frame about how to load the vehicle and thinking forward to how we'll put the crews in the vehicle. You know, the ascent profile for this flight, we practiced the exact profile that Mike Hopkins and others will fly very soon, Doug Hurley and Bob Binkin. We had the abort system, the crew escape system in Dragon actually enabled for this flight, and we were able to see how that worked, and we'll get the data back and look at those triggers and how it performed. You know, on orbit, we got a lot of great data on the vehicle in terms of the thermal performance, power performance. The vehicle really did better than we expected. And then the rendezvous was phenomenal as we came in, checked out those sensors. The link to space station worked, the command link, watching the vehicle come in, and then have a real precise docking and seeing how the docking system performed. So that was phenomenal. And then during the attached phase, of course, we had cargo ops, which will do the same thing on both Demo 2 and then the Crew 1 and other missions. And then we did a robotic survey of the vehicle to look at the thermal protection system and other systems, and that went really well. I will say one thing, this mission, you know, it was only 6 days long. It was a sprint from start to finish. And thinking about, you know, where we've been in operations in that sprint, I think Kenny would probably tell you the same thing. It was just a phenomenal job by the team. And then, of course, today, you know, the undocking, watching how those systems performed, that went flawless. It's a very tight sequence between undocking and the deorbit burn, how the nose cone performed, how the deorbit burn was executed, and the entry was phenomenal. We did have Riley on board, a test dummy, and that's going to give us a lot of important data for the accelerations during both the ascent phase and then the entry phase under the parachutes and then landing. So we'll collect that data and look at that. You know, over the next few weeks, we'll be doing post-flight reviews. In fact, just next week, we'll have one for the launch vehicle and the ground segment at KSC. We'll start reviewing that. And then subsequently, we'll do reviews with SpaceX on the orbit phase of the mission. This flight really sets us up well for the rest of the year. The very vehicle that's in the water in the Atlantic today will be the in-flight abort vehicle. And so one of the first things that will happen is the vehicle will come back to KSC and go over into the processing area and start getting refurbed for the in-flight abort test, which should be in the summer timeframe, in the June timeframe. And then Demo 2 vehicles at Hawthorne getting built for the first crewed mission. That's in progress and going well. That work has continued all through the flight. So that'll be a busy year for us for SpaceX with in-flight abort in the June timeframe, and then Demo 2 later in the year with the first crewed mission. I don't think we saw really anything in the mission so far, and we've got to do the data reviews that you know would preclude us having the crewed mission later this year. And then after that, you know, it's a busy time in our program. Also, if you look in the April timeframe, we're getting ready for the orbit flight test for Boeing, and that will happen very soon. And so our program will transition after this mission and the data reviews into preparing not only for in-flight abort and Demo 2, but also the orbit flight test, the uncrewed flight test for Boeing. And that'll be coming up in the April timeframe. Spacecraft 3, which is the Boeing vehicle, is coming together at the Commercial Crew Processing Facility down in Florida, and they're in the middle of a bunch of very critical testing right now at an El Segundo to verify that the spacecraft can work successfully in space. And then later on this year, we'll have the crewed flight test for Boeing as well. So if you just look at all the activities in Commercial Crew, it's a super busy time. In addition to this flight, in the last few weeks, we did parachute tests for SpaceX and Boeing. And so if you look at all the activities to get ready for flying our crews, it's just a very exciting time. So again, congratulations to our SpaceX team and all the NASA people across the country that worked so hard for many, many years on this flight. It really sets us up for the rest of the year, and it's a super exciting time to be in Commercial Crew. Now I'll turn it over to Hopper.
All right, thanks, Steve. So on behalf of the astronaut office and the crew, I'd like to also extend our congratulations to the SpaceX team, to the Commercial Crew team, to really all of NASA, and to everyone that was involved in this major milestone on returning human launch and landing capabilities back to U.S. soil. I think that's very exciting. But as you can see on the video of the vehicle, work is still ongoing. The recovery procedures process is still ongoing, and I'm personally very anxious to hear how I think it's Ripley is feeling after they pull her out of the capsule and get her back onto the recovery vehicle. In terms of some major takeaways from a crew perspective, I think one of the things that we're very excited about from this DM1 mission is, for the first time, we've gotten to see an end-to-end test. And so now we've brought together the people, the hardware, and all the processes and procedures, and gotten to see how they all work together. And that's very important on this as we move towards putting people on board the vehicle. And as Steve also said, of course, we're very interested in seeing the data. I suspect there's going to be some lessons learned, some improvements, some changes that we're going to have to make from this. That's all part of the testing process. In terms of what's ahead for the crew, so for all of the crew, including the DM2 crew, Bob and Doug, and Crew 1, myself and Victor Glover, and then the backup crew, Kjell Lindgren, we're all going to be following very closely the in-flight abort test, as well as the procedures, the training to get ready for that DM2 mission. We also have a lot of verification testing, final verification testing that we'll all be involved in, as well as test subjects for that. Specifically for Bob and Doug as DM2, of course, they're going to start focusing even more on that training for the DM2 mission. They've got, after this mission, they've got a lot less runway in front of them, so it's going to start moving, I think, a lot quicker. For the Crew 1 crew, the team, Victor and I, and even for Chell as the backup, we've got a lot of training, not only for Dragon, but also for ISS. Our mission is to not only get up there and return safely, but is actually to do some work for the ISS program while we're there. And so that means we've got to do all of the training for being able to do the spacewalks and being able to operate the robotic arm and maintain the station and do that critical science that's been going on for, gosh, over 18 years now. Pretty amazing. So that's what's ahead for us. I guess finally I'd like to just kind of emphasize that this mission, this amazing week that we've had, is really just one small step in this very methodical build-up approach that we've been going through, that the program has laid out, that the company has laid out in order for us to put people on board these vehicles and get them up and back to the station. And so, again, congratulations to the entire team, and over to Kenny.
Thanks, Hopper. And just about any conversation you're going to have today with anybody around here is going to start with a congratulations. And so I'll certainly offer mine to Steve Stitch, Kathy Leaders, the Commercial Crew Program. Just a phenomenal effort. It's not easy doing what this program's had to do for the last several years, and to finally see the product of that has just been incredible for the last week. And our friends out at SpaceX, Benji Reed, Artie Matthews, the team out there, we've been working with them for the better part of a decade doing commercial cargo services, and that's we know that team. They're as every bit excited about human spaceflight as we are, and their passion shows. It shows whenever they launch a vehicle. It shows whenever they bring a vehicle home. There's just a lot of excitement around that, and it's quite invigorating for a lot of us to see that kind of passion. It really is cool. So anyway, to Benji and the team at SpaceX, certainly we pass along our congratulations from the space station program, and we'll certainly look forward to seeing you guys again soon. As far as the milestones, the things we got to do while the Crew Dragon was on board, one of the things from a station program that we were really looking to do was to check out the interface that we installed here a couple of years ago on the front end of PMA-2 to ensure that our latches worked properly, interfacing with the Dragon, that we were able to flow power through the interface. All of that worked just perfectly. And so for us, we feel like we're in a good position going forward to support the Commercial Crew Program, and that we don't have anything else, at least on the front end of the PMA-2, that we need to worry about going forward. We are later this year going to install another docking adapter up on the Node 2 Zenith port, which will give us two ports to dock the commercial crew vehicles, and so we're excited to get on with that activity later on this year. So as far as the team, I talked to our team earlier this week, and I said probably in about a week from now we'll forget that we had a Crew Dragon on board, just because of what lies in front of us, and that is we have a new crew coming up later this coming week on Thursday. We'll see the launch of 58 Soyuz from Baikonur, and so we're excited about that. The team has already started to deploy there. The crew's there and ready to go, and so we're excited to get the crew back up to a size of 6 again. Again, just gives us more flexibility, the opportunity to do more science and work on the backlog that we have on board. So we're excited about that. And one of the first things we're going to be tackling as soon as we get back up to a crew of 6 is a set of EVAs. We can call it a triple EVA because, like it sounds, it's a set of 3 EVAs. We're going to do 3 of them in about 16 days. And so right after hatch open, we're going to be hard at work trying to put the final plans in place for those EVAs. And then shortly after that, we've got a couple of cargo vehicles coming up. In fact, another SpaceX vehicle, and also a Northrop Grumman Cygnus is coming on board as well during the month of April. So there's a lot going on. Again, we're very excited about what's happened this week, and next week we'll go tackle some of the stuff that's coming forward. But at least today and for this weekend, we want to celebrate this accomplishment with the Commercial Crew Program and the folks from SpaceX, and bask in the glow of that along with them and enjoy it. It was quite a few days here, Dan. So with that, we'll hand it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Kenny, Mike, and Steve over there in Houston. Thanks for those words. And now we're going to get back to the action. We're getting some views back of that recovery of the Dragon spacecraft. The teams are in place, and now we're just waiting for it to make its way onto the recovery ship.
Exactly. So now that Dragon has splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean, the recovery team is going to go through a number of steps as we recover the Dragon spacecraft and lift it onto the recovery ship. Now, in case if you're joining us, well, just real quick, you can see on your screen there a live shot of Dragon recovery, the capsule bobbing in the sea there with the Dragon team working on those recovery operations. In case you are just joining us, the mission has gone very smoothly so far today. Dragon successfully splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean just several minutes ago.
At 5:45 a.m. Pacific.
5:45 a.m. So, gosh, I can't believe how late in the morning it is already. Time flies. And about 240 nautical miles away from Cape Canaveral. Approximately 6 hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, the deorbit burn, and placed itself on a trajectory toward the Atlantic Ocean.
And this is actually a replay of that final descent from just a little bit earlier this morning. At this point, Dragon was under the 2 drogue chutes, and those were responsible for all of that initial slowing down. And they also were responsible for pulling out the main parachutes, which you can see in the replay here. And those 4 main parachutes deployed successfully. We heard from Benji and also the teams during the action that they went exactly as planned, everything kind of happening exactly on the timeline too. But that all came after Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, and those parachutes were deployed. And now, though, we're on to the final part of Dragon's journey, as it's pretty soon going to get lifted out of the water and placed onto the recovery boat.
So again, this is a replay of the re-entry and splashdown that we witnessed live several minutes ago. Gorgeous shot of those lovely full parachutes as they are slowing the Dragon capsule down to the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, it's already been 45 minutes since that happened.
Wow.
It feels like it was just
5.
about 5 minutes ago. But yeah, that splashdown was 5:45 a.m. Pacific, 8:45 a.m. So a little bit later in the morning over there on the East Coast when Dragon splashed down again. Yeah, about 200 or so nautical miles out from Port Canaveral.
If you've been following along with our mission this week, you already know that we don't have actual humans on board, just Ripley, our anthropomorphic test device. She has lots of sensors placed around the body, I guess you would say.
Inside the suit, there's a microphone inside as well.
Yeah. So this will give us lots of really cool data about the G-forces and what the test device experienced during launch and docking and re-entry. However, as with all steps so far in our Demo 1 mission, our teams will be covering the full steps in the recovery process as if it were an actual crewed mission in order to prepare for our first time with NASA astronauts on board. You saw earlier that the recovery fast boats went very quickly to the splashdown point. Go Searcher, the main recovery vessel, followed along quickly, which you can see in your screen right now. Wow, it's a picture perfect day, so it's pretty great. So we're going to be watching as the recovery vessel gets closer to the Dragon capsule, and we'll be able to see it get lifted out of the ocean. That's a beautiful shot there. So our recovery crew has been already performed the safety checks that they do after splashdown. The vehicle itself safed itself as well as soon as it detected that it was in the water, and the team made sure it was safe to approach the Dragon spacecraft.
And then upon the immediate detection of landing, Dragon automatically released all of those main parachutes, and that just prevents the wind from catching them and potentially pulling or dragging the spacecraft across the water. And those parachutes also get recovered. Another one of the fast approach boats was tasked with that immediately after splashdown. Following that successful parachute cutaway, Dragon automatically saves any of the pyrotechnics still present on the vehicle, and it can also automatically perform a couple of additional minor system configurations. The astronauts, if they were on board, would remain seated, so Ripley obviously hasn't gotten up right now on the boat, but
she has not unbuckled her seatbelt yet.
She's not unbuckled her seatbelt yet. The astronauts, if they were on board, would remain seated, and they stay in their suits at this point. But the Dragon spacecraft has air conditioning on board, and that helps keep the temperatures in check inside the spacecraft. And the communication system on board also remains powered, so the crew still has their two-way communication as they are just kind of sitting there in the capsule waiting for the teams to move in and pull them up on the boat.
If I were an astronaut inside the capsule right now, I would imagine this point to be kind of like when you're going through a car wash. You know, you're safe, you can talk, you're comfortable in your enclosed environment, but you can't open the door just yet.
There's a lot of water.
Yeah. Now, it took a little bit over 10 minutes for the recovery team to complete their safety checks, and they completed their preparation activities. And right now, as we can see, they are making progress toward being able to lift Dragon up and onto the recovery vessel. As part of the preparation for this lift, we saw earlier that a member of the recovery team actually climbed on top of the capsule, and that was in order to attach the Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. So a lot of physical requirements for that particular role. I probably would not be able to do it. I'd fall right off most likely. But it's really cool to be able to see our recovery team who has been practicing live in action here with these beautiful shots from the Atlantic Ocean.
And so for now, we're just going to continue getting these great views from the boats out there. This view is actually from one of the other vessels that traveled out to the recovery zone. This is from the Go Navigator and the combined NASA teams with a number of managers, flight docs, and other personnel that will be involved in kind of the game day operations when we have crew on board the spacecraft. They're on the Go Navigator.
Like we've mentioned before, the ship that you see there is fully equipped for medical checkouts. If we did have astronauts on board Dragon today, as soon as they egress from the side hatch, they would be taken into the medical quarters and given a medical examination just to make sure that everything is good and everyone's in good health. There's a helicopter pad on top of it. Additionally, due to unpredictable sea conditions, whenever we splash down, it might take the crew a couple days to get out and back from the splashdown point, and so the ship is also capable of housing the recovery crew for a couple of weeks, realistically, if absolutely necessary. Obviously a long time to be on a ship, in my opinion, but it's fully equipped, and I've been on that ship myself, and it's just incredible to me as someone that keeps my eyes towards the sky and not necessarily, water, ocean sickness. It's just incredible to me that we're able to have a vessel like this in our fleet, really, when you think of the full encapsulation of what a mission requires. It's not just going up, it's coming back down and back onto land safely as well. And this vessel is a great example of how we're able to do that.
And as mentioned just a little while ago, so this is actually a view from the Go Navigator. That's one of the two ships that have traveled out to the splashdown zone. One of the NASA personnel on board that ship is Shane Kimbrough, and he's actually the lead for all of the various NASA recovery teams and pretty much responsible for overseeing all the crew's needs and all their recovery, all their quarantine before launch. He likes to say I think he told us they kind of belong to him once they're in quarantine and getting ready. So he's actually joining us now via a satellite phone from that ship. Shane, thanks for calling in real quick. How's everything looking out there with Dragon Recovery?
Hey, Dan. Great to talk to you from the Go Navigator. Everything's going really well. It was just beautiful seeing it come in on the drogues and then the main parachutes and then obviously the splashdown. You guys are probably seeing video now. The Go Searcher is getting pretty close to getting the capsule and getting it on deck.
And so, Shane, what was the trip out there like? I know we're kind of at a landing zone a little bit further away than when we have crew actually on board, but how's everything look so far?
Everything's been great. The crew's taken great care of us. It was about a 30-hour journey to get here to the splashdown zone, but we woke up this morning knowing we were only a couple hours away from all the action happening, so that was really cool, and now it's great to be involved in the recovery of Demo 1.
That's awesome to hear. It was one thing for us to be able to watch it from Mission Control. What was it like watching Dragon splashdown with your own eyes, Shane?
Absolutely incredible. I mean, there's a lot of excitement building on the boat, the 30 minutes or so prior to entry, and then once, one person saw the drogues open, everybody's yelling and pointing and all excited. So it was really, really neat. And from our perspective, it looked absolutely perfect. I'm not sure what the data will show otherwise, but it looked really amazing. We have a beautiful day out here, very calm seas, and couldn't ask for better weather.
And so, Shane, obviously you didn't come down in this capsule today, but you have come down in a capsule, but on land. What's this experience being out on the ocean been like? How does that really compare from when you touched down over in Kazakhstan?
Yeah, good question. As we're sitting here talking, it's been, 45, 50 minutes in splashdown, and I'm thinking, there's a crew in there, and that's a long time to be waiting to get picked up, so we'll tighten up that timeline a bit, just knowing the crew's probably not going to feel very well at this point, and the sooner we can get you home and get them on deck and then eventually back on land will help their recovery process.
All right, so we're continuing to get these views. What's kind of ahead for you and the rest of the teams? I know you said it's going to be about a 30-minute or a 30-hour boat ride back into harbor.
Yeah, that'll be probably about the same going back. I think we'll be out here another hour or so, maybe 2 hours, just getting everything situated, and the SpaceX team on Go Searcher, once they give us the go, then we'll start heading back to port. And we're supposed to arrive late Saturday night back into Port Canaveral.
All right, well, Shane, we'll let you get back to watching all the operations. I know you got a job to do other than talking to us, but I do really appreciate you calling in from all the way out there in Atlantic. It was a great splashdown, and we'll see you when you're back in Houston.
Sounds great. Thank you, guys, and enjoy the rest of the scenes out here as you're getting them from the Go Navigator. Take care.
All right. And again, that was NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough. He's out with the NASA teams. We're on a boat watching as the Go Searcher gets a little bit closer. Looks like pretty soon they're going to start reeling that Dragon in, and we're going to get to see it go up onto the Dragon nest.
So you saw a couple of seconds ago the shot on your screen of the back of the boat itself. That is the cradle that you saw. That's what we've been referring to as the nest. It's designed specifically for the Crew Dragon design, and that is exactly where, once the lifting arms have lifted the capsule out of the water, and it'll place it back down in that spot. And then that is basically where, if there were astronauts on board, that is the position in which they would be egressing from out of the capsule. Looks like we're getting closer and closer to the capsule.
And it should be in range soon. As we've talked about, it's expected to be about an hour or a little bit less post-splashdown for the capsule to be back up on the boat. And as you kind of heard Shane talk about, really you just want to try and get the crew out of there and in a more stable environment as quickly as possible. And then you can actually start take the boat and start heading back into port. And if you missed some of the data earlier in the show, they are a little over 200 nautical miles out to sea right now, which is why we're hearing it's going to take them about 30 hours to come back in. Once we have crew on board, that's not going to be the case. They're going to be in much closer to land, within about 20 or 24 nautical miles, and so that gives you the option to be back at shore in just a couple of hours. But as Kate pointed out earlier, there is a helipad on that boat. So if for any reason they needed to get the crew back much quicker, they could actually airlift them out and then bring them right back to dry land there in Florida. But the gap continuing to close. It sounds like operations are definitely picking up here in SpaceX headquarters if you're starting to hear some of that. but everything looking great so far. We should have that Dragon on the boat in just a little bit. continuing to watch Dragon's recovery. At this point, the teams have already lowered the vessel's hydraulic lift mechanism down into the water as they're getting ready to bring that Dragon spacecraft up into the on-deck translation system that SpaceX decided to call the Nest. And Dragon's going to remain in that nest during its journey back to the coast, where it's going to arrive at Port Canaveral, Florida, and we're expecting that to take about 30 hours or so. For this mission, it'll take them that long to make their way back because they're a little over 200 nautical miles out to sea. But for crewed missions, as we've said, the landing zone's only going to be a couple hours ride away from port, and that's just so SpaceX can quickly get those returning astronauts back to dry land, where things are a little bit stable, and after you've been in microgravity for about 6 months, your feet will probably appreciate that. The capsule pretty soon, though, is going to get lifted and set into that nest, and then they're going to center and orient the vehicle. And Dragon will eventually get translated into the hangar aboard the ship so that the teams can open up the hatch. And for missions with astronauts aboard, we're almost at the point where the recovery teams would be assisting the crew to get out of Dragon. So we're almost there. That would happen shortly after they get back onto the ship. In aerospace terms, we call that the crew's egress from the spacecraft. And under the typical circumstances, the SpaceX recovery team is going to be helping out the crew of Dragon within 1 hour of landing.
Yeah, so you can see on your screen there, Dragon is getting closer and closer to the back end of the recovery ship. Just a minute or two ago, we saw the crew member that was responsible for attaching all the appropriate rigging to the vessel jump off the capsule and back into the water. Right now we're just waiting for Dragon to lift up and out of the water and into the nest.
And there it goes.
So there facing us is what we call the side hatch, and that is where, as Dan just mentioned, the astronauts would, if we had astronauts on board today, where they would be exiting. The top hatch is what we use to connect to the ISS, and that is currently hidden underneath the nose cone. But like we said, astronauts will be coming out of the side hatch. And we got a beautiful shot there. Now the hydraulic lift is coming back towards us, and it is preparing to lower the Dragon capsule into its nest. Like we said, we are treating this demonstration mission with the recovery operations as if there were actual astronauts on board. And of course, before we would be able to open the hatch, we would have to make sure that the spacecraft cabin pressure is equalized with the outside environment before doing so. So once Dragon is seated, and you can hear some cheers behind me as the remaining folks that we have here on the SpaceX team outside of Mission Control are cheering with the placement of Dragon into the nest there, as you can see. You might also notice that the thermal protective system that we have on the outside of Dragon, if you were watching during launch, was a pristine white. Of course, upon re-entry, like we mentioned before, there was plasma, of course, as it re-entered through Earth's atmosphere. So we have a lovely toasted marshmallow there sitting in the nest of our recovery ship, which is, I just think it's such a cool view now that we're bringing the Dragon down, and we are obviously recovering our rockets, and it's just really cool to see that evidence of return back to Earth is really wonderful.
Yeah, and we had fantastic luck with the weather today. The sea states were relatively calm by all reports, only a couple of clouds dotting the sky. Had great views of Dragon all the way down under its parachutes, even before its parachutes. We saw it just after that
plane,
entry interface, and we were getting some really cool views from the WB-57 airplane. But with Dragon back on the boat, that's about it for us. We're just now at about the end of this mission. So at this point, as we talked about, the recovery personnel would assist in the astronauts getting out of Dragon, and those medical teams would be standing by, and there's medical evaluation rooms on board. But no people on board. Ripley won't need a medical exam, but they will be getting all of the data back from the sensors placed around Ripley, that anthropomorphic test device. on board as they get all of the different G-forces that Dragon was exposed to, the sound environment, everything that the crew would experience, Ripley just experienced. But this mission started just about 6 days ago with that early morning launch on March 2nd. We had a successful approach and docking to the International Space Station, did all of the demonstrations as expected for the mission. It was docked for the last 5 days. They tested Dragon's communications and power systems with the space station. They unloaded about 400 pounds of cargo and loaded 300 pounds of cargo back on. We had that undocking just a couple of hours ago, a successful re-entry, 4 great parachutes, and a splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean at 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:45 a.m. for us over here on the Pacific Coast. So it was really a fantastic mission. It's been a huge honor for me to be out here at Hawthorne to share this with everybody and to share it with my SpaceX counterparts out here. A successful mission, the first successful test flight of NASA's Commercial Crew Program to the International Space Station.
Yeah. So as Dan said, it's been an incredible honor to share this mission with the public. All the teams are incredibly thrilled with the success of this demonstration mission, which of course paves the way for our first crewed flight later this year. Be sure to follow along with SpaceX and NASA on our social media for updates and next steps on the Commercial Crew Program. Until next time, see you then.